Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna, we're studying Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, entitled The Lord's Pastimes Out of Vrindavan. We're in text 24. It's October 23rd, 2022. Text 24, Canto 3, Chapter 3, Srimad Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaivanavottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tatojayam udirahat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, to Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yutamashloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Text 24. Okay. Puryam Kadachit Krida Bi Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepu Bhagavat Mata Kovida Puryam Kadachit Kridad Bir Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepur Bhagavan Mata Kovida Puryam Kadachit Kridad Bir Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepur Bhagavan Mata Kovida Puryam Kadachit Kridad Bir Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepur Bhagavan Mata Kovida. Would anyone Puryam Kadachit Kridad Bir Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepur Bhagavan Mata Kovida. Would anyone online like to recite the verse? We'll go to the word meanings. Puryam, in the city of Dwarka. Kadachit, once upon a time. Kridadbi, by sporting activities. Yadu, the descendants of Yadu. Boja, the descendants of Boja. Kumarakai, princes. Kopita, became angry. Munaya, the great sages. Shepu, cursed. Bhagavat, the personality of Godhead. Mata, desire. Kovida, cognizant. Translation. Once upon a time, great sages were made angry by the sporting activities of the princely descendants of the Yadu and Boja dynasties, and thus, as desired by the Lord, the sages cursed them. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The associates of the Lord, who were playing the part of princely descendants of the Yadu and Boja dynasties, were not ordinary living entities. It is not possible that they could offend any saintly man or sage, nor could the sages, who were all pure devotees of the Lord, be influenced to anger by any of the sporting activities of the princes born in the holy dynasties of Yadu or Boja, wherein the Lord himself appeared as a descendant. The cursing of the princes by the sages was another transcendental pastime of the Lord to make a show of anger. The princes were cursed in order that one may know that even the descendants of the Lord, who could never be vanquished by any act of material nature, were subjected to the reactions of anger by great devotees of the Lord. One should therefore take great care and attention not to commit an offense at the feet of a devotee of the Lord. Om Gana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupa Kadamayam Darati Svapadantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Upam Sakrajatam Saganaragnatanditam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishkan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3 Chapter 3 Text 24 Puryam Kadachit Kridad Bir Yadu Boja Kumarakai Kopita Munaya Shepur Bhagavan Mata Kovida. Once upon a time, great sages were made angry by the sporting activities of the princely descendants of the Yadu and Bhoja dynasties, and thus, as desired by the Lord, the sages cursed them. Hare Krishna, thanks for joining us in this Srimad Bhagavatam discussion. All right, so this in several verses, yes, it's about the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty. And it's like a theme in the Bhagavatam here in this part and in other places also. And so, all right, so this is like, yeah, so like after the Battle of Kurukshetra, and then the disappearance, it's this far out type of pastime. And it's going to be described. It's going to be described here. Also, the 11th canto. There's a whole chapter about it. And then you get into well, and you get into reasons, and there's complexities, and I'm not an expert in the complexities. One reason we see here, though. So it's like how come Krishna is arranging this disappearance of his own dynasty? So nothing material could defeat them. So they killed themselves in a drunken stupor. Yeah, okay, but so it gets into a thing, and some boy, teenagers, they were pranking the sages, and the sages got angry as part of transcendental pastime, and they cursed them. And, okay, so it led to the disappearance of the Yadus. Okay, so one thing is to discourage the idea of spirituality being intrinsically connected to DNA, to the family of birth. And we can imagine, or we even hear, in the commentaries, like because let's say if someone is, oh yes, no, my descendants go back to Krishna himself. Oh, you must be okay. And And Prabhupada comments on this, like there's something called,
My descendants come from Krishna.
what's that?
My descendants come from Krishna.
We all come from Krishna. So, well, the Yadu, just like Yehuda, it's the same root. Prabhupada was asked about that, right? The actual Hebrew root for Jew is Yehuda or Yehudit, Judy for women. So it's the same root as Yadu. So Prabhupada was asked, is there a connection? Could you imagine Prabhupada? He somewhat disregarded the question as if it didn't matter. Could you imagine that?
It's the most important question in the universe.
Yes. So Prabhupada sometimes talks about the caste Goswamis. He talks about the Nityananda Vamsa. Means like that there are personalities in Vrindavan and they're claiming, and their claim could certainly be true, that like their DNA, their ancestry comes from Nityananda himself. Nityananda, from 500 years ago. So, and they're like, that is to be honored, but then they've made it, the caste Brahmins, the Nityananda Vams, they made it that like, no one can really go to Lord Chaitanya except through us, regardless of what our habits are, regardless of what our lifestyle is, like that. And it just becomes this very material, kind of like this royalty-based thing, not based on quality. So Krishna wants to discourage that, and that's a reason, not the only reason, but it's a reason for this whole disappearance of the Yadu dynasty. And it's such a theme. It's such a theme of this whole bhakti yoga, the whole Krishna consciousness. It's such a theme that it's universal. It's not based on what family were you born in. It's not based on how much money do you have, what sort of education do you have, what sort of degrees, what are your material accomplishments. Just because Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Saja Kabunoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitta Karya Udai. The nature of the soul is to love Krishna from whatever our past has been. We get to engage in bhakti yoga, and Prabhupada often cites the verse from second canto Bhagavatam, Kirata Hunanda Pulinda Pukasha Bir Shubhaya Vinakasharya Yenecha Papya Pashrayashraya Shujanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Namaha. So that verse, Sukadev Goswami, he's actually talking about different races that from a material point of view would be considered fallen. And it's translated as like races who maybe were part of the Veda culture and left it. The Greeks, the Turks, the Huns, those who became the Europeans and the Americans and like that, the Africans, like that. And then, but the point of the verse, that whatever one's birth, wherever we were born, whatever one's family, most, maybe all of us here were born in families that, we grew up with like killing animals, and we considered food to be dead flesh and blood. And we didn't even think about what's that?
What kind of family?
Yeah, right, exactly. And all our parents have many fine qualities too, but as far as spiritual culture, that wasn't there. That wasn't there. And like that. And so for most everyone born, these days, practically anywhere in the world. But then the point is like, by serving a pure devotee, by serving Prabhavishnu, by serving the pure devotee of Krishna, Vishnu, then we get purified. And there's all sorts of bad philosophies going on. No, first you need to take birth in this family, and then that's just all nonsense. So that's and so Prabhupada came to where there's all these races that are not Vedic, that are not inclined to the dharmic regular principles. In the time of Lord Chaitanya, right here in Malini's ashram, So right next to the altar, there's a figurine of Srila Haridas Thakur. So just there's so many examples of that, right? So Haridas Thakur, he was born into a Muslim family, right? And the Vedic Brahmins, oh, that's very fallen, oh, that's very fallen. But we say Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, ki jai, right? So like Namacharya means he's the prime example of chanting Hare Krishna with love and devotion, and say, right? So and he and like Advaita Acharya honored Haridas Thakur as just the greatest devotee, and like other Vedavadaratas of the time, they criticize, oh, but do you know what family he was born in? And so there's just pastime after pastime to illustrate that this is, it's not about material birth. Lord Chaitanya became the student and heard from Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy was born in the Sudra family. He was into politics. He was the governor. He was right there. And then he was Lord Chaitanya. Of course, who's Radha Krishna himself. But apart from that, he's in the sannyasa ashram. He was born into a very Brahminical family. And he's submitting himself as a student to Ramananda Roy. So it's just to illustrate this. So it's the same theme here, a theme of the disappearance of the other. Like Krishna wanted to emphasize, he wanted to like minimize the possibility that the idea of Krishna consciousness, surrender to Krishna, the ultimate goal of Bhagavad Gita, Saradhaman Prityagya, Mame Kam Sharanam Braja, Am Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Moksha Shami Mach. Shucha, Krishna says, just abandon all varieties of religion. Just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Mashucha, don't worry, don't fear. And so Krishna says, that's not dependent on anything material. It's not about, oh, my descendant is from Krishna, my descendant is from Lord Nityananda. Okay. Now, so that's like a very encouraging principle. Okay. Well, it's very encouraging because oh, okay, so from wherever I am, whatever, not just our DNA and our ancestry, but whatever we've done in this lifetime, we get to choose Krishna now. Okay, nothing prevents that. So that's very encouraging. It can also be daunting because it takes away our excuses. It takes away, oh, but I did this shameful thing and I'm from this type of family. So therefore, maybe in 10 lifetimes, I'll start to chant rounds because if we actually get the philosophy of like, no, there's no excuses. And it's not about shame and guilt. It's just about responsibility. And so maybe I'm choosing not to very much give myself to this process of transcendental bhakti yoga as given by Prabhupada. I'm choosing to give myself 0.1%, 1%, 20%, not near 100%. Okay, but it's not because of this and that. This like I don't really want it so much. Like yes. Savai Pumsam Purodharmoya To Bhaktira Hokshaje I took your Pratita Yatma Supersedati. That verse says that the greatest dharma for everyone is pure devotional service. And if we're sincere, nothing material can get in the way. Nothing about nature, our ancestry, or nurture, our upbringing, our past, our previous choices. If we're sincere, nothing can get in the way of that transcendental, spiritual, powerful choice. Okay, just to balance the conversation, it's not that birth doesn't matter. Krishna says, there's like a quintessential Varnashram verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Shatur Varnyam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha Sanusti Tasya Dharma. No, Tasyakartaram Apimam Vijakartaram Aviyam Tatur Varnyam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma. So Krishna says, yeah, one's position should be assessed according to their quality and their activity, not according to birth, not according to janma. So we can say birth doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does matter. We can just see very practically, right? Like let's say if let's say if someone is born into a family where for a few generations, they're both mother and father, grandparents are physicians and surgeons, and someone else is born into like a ghetto life to drug dealers and prostitutes and things like that. Okay. Okay. So it's not really true that birth doesn't matter. Statistically speaking, the baby born into the family of surgeons has a better chance to become a surgeon. Okay. At the same time, it's not automatic, right? That baby, he or she still needs to do the work. Just like, oh, you were born. Your father's a surgeon. Your mother's a brain surgeon. Oh, okay. So you're 5 years old now. Here's a scalpel. Go to it. No, still need to go to work. Get the grades at school. Pass the exams, like that. And it could be that that the one born into the family of the physicians, maybe 30 years later, they're on the street and addicted to heroin and crack. And it could be that with a lot of clear intention, that baby born into that ghetto, destitute, poverty, sub-poverty scene, that with clear intention that baby is a highly renowned surgeon 30 years later. Okay, so it's not that birth doesn't matter. At the same time, it's not an automatic determining factor. What one needs to do the work. So right. So for sure, so we see like amongst those sometimes born into families where the parents are practicing devotional service. So that's a great advantage, right? That's a great advantage. At the same time, I've sometimes seen the mentality, just like kind of like, look, I was born into this, like committing to chant rounds, like we don't need to do that, committing to one, like we got Krishna in our heart. We've seen this mentality. Also, I've seen it even sometimes like amongst like followers of Prabhupada, maybe from very early days, and it's kind of from very early days, kind of like, and they've truly done so much service to Prabhupada. And it's not for me to say what's in their heart, but kind of like, I'm in this lineage from the beginning, and so based on that, I don't need to follow sadhana. And again, it's not for me to say what's someone's situation, whether it's someone who was with Prabhupada in 1966 or the bum on the street. I ultimately don't know what's in their heart in relation to Prabhupada and Krishna. Still, based on principles, we can know that if we're coming up with excuses not to be rigorous in following, then that in following the sadhana program Prabhupada gave us, that can be very risky for our spiritual lives. And while it's not for me to say, what's happening in someone's heart between them and God, at the same time, it is my responsibility to determine how to associate with whom. That is our responsibility, without making like ultimate judgment, like that. So so this is, Prabhupada makes it clear. So like pastime, the whole material creation is Krishna's pastime. I mean, typically we think of pastimes like Krishna dancing with the gopis, Krishna wrestling with the cowherd boys, Krishna in like that. It's so Krishna, Yamuna Tira, Vanachari, wandering on the banks of Yamuna, playing his flute. These are pastimes. And the whole material creation is also a pastime of Krishna. So that means that in my material life, I'm completely part of Krishna. It's my pastime. So Malini's shaking her head. I just set a philosophical trap, but she didn't walk into the trap. She's nodding her head. Right. So no, it's not my past. It is Krishna's pastime. It is Krishna's pastime. And this is so because we hear a lot about that, like, the secret, the power of intention. Actually, and see, there's truth to it. The things are attractive, like bogus pseudo stuff, it's attractive because there's always grains of truth. Actually, I did create the material world. That because of my desire for material enjoyment, I got this particular body and so the living entities who reject their original nature as servants of Krishna, they develop desires. And so just like we could say that the prisoners, with some, this isn't a popular analogy, but with the prisoners in the prison house created the prison. It's true, right? If no one had the criminal mentality, there'd be no prisons. So because of the particular consciousness cultivated by those with criminal mentality, government creates prisons to reciprocate. Okay, so similarly, in one sense, we created the material world, the stars and the moon. There's truth to that, but it's not my pastime. Pastime indicates, to use transformational language, it's get to. It indicates get to, that like just in mundane activity, right? Oh, I have to go to work, but on the weekends I get to hike in the woods, I get to go canoeing, I get to play golf and tennis. So that's my pastime. Okay, so Natasha Karam Karanam Chavidyate. So for Krishna and Krishna's pure devotees, everything's pastime. For Krishna, even the material creation. It means like there's nothing they have to do. Prabhupada didn't have to, come to New York, right? Like that. In a sense, he did, because he just had this burning desire to fulfill the mission of his spiritual master. But that's not born of the lower modes or even material sattva. So our material life is not our pastime. That's us being pushed and pulled by the ropes, by the gunas, by our material desires, driving us like a taskmaster. And for some, yes, Bipale Sevinu Kripana Durajana Chapala Sukha Lava Lagi Re. So the Govinda Dasa Abhilasa, Govinda Dasa Abhilasa, Vindare. Yes, Govinda Dasa's, like he said, for some few drops of illusory happiness, I've served bad and wicked men. I served bad and wicked masters. Kamala Jala Dala Jivana Talamala. Bhajupati Hari Niti Re. This so-called material happiness. It's like a drop of water on a lotus leaf, tottering, talamala, tottering. You can just drop it any minute. So basically, we don't get what we want, we're frustrated. But even if we do get what we want, we're still in fear and anxiety unless we just drink or smoke enough that we're numb to it. Because we know it's tottering. It's just going to fall off the leaf today, tomorrow, time of death maximum. So our, so influenced by the modes of nature, our activities are in the realm of have to. It means it's not pastime. It's not pastime. And at the same time, we do get to participate in Krishna's pastimes. How? That's what we're doing. Right? So Krishna's empowered, pure servant A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, he came to the West and he rejuvenated this bhakti movement worldwide. So here, by absorbing ourselves in this, I'll call it transpersonal literature, we could say Prabhupada's books, we say Prabhupada's books, but we don't want to confuse that with ordinary literature, like an ordinary book, right? So like each word is absolute truth, and each word is, the vibration is non-different from the truth it reveals. So it's transformation, whatever we cognitively understand or not. And so by here we are, whatever our history in this life or our ancestry, here we are discussing third canto Srimad Bhagavatam, discussions between Vidura and Maitreya. We are participating in Krishna's pastimes. Vidura and Uddhava now. Yeah, excuse me. So we're participating in Krishna's pastimes by participating in Prabhupada's movement. Okay, and so yeah, that's it. And then that's the life of the soul. That's the joy of the soul. Now we might not be participating with that purity and love of, say, Mother Yashoda in the Damodar pastimes, right? She's so loving Krishna that Krishna causes her forgetfulness, to forget that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so her forgetfulness of Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's from deep love. My forgetfulness of Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's from my alienation from self. That's from my wanting, my determination to not love Krishna, from my determination. So that's an important distinction. So our material world means forgetfulness of who we are, servants of Krishna, forgetfulness of Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's not pastime for us, for Krishna it is. And then a very high stage of pastime, even more pure than the yadus, not that they're impure, but there's levels of purity. Then there's forgetfulness of Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, but that's coming from love. That's coming from love. So Srila Prabhupada, he gave us a program. We've used this word sadhana. It's like regulative principles of freedom. And whenever we're engaged in Prabhupada's program, we're participating in the eternal transcendental pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna. And the more we do that, then the more we get a taste for it. And we often say, like, whether I'm involved in this process of bhakti yoga or not, I always get scientific experiential confirmation that the process works. Okay. So yesterday I was at my computer doing correspondence and writing and things. And then in the middle of the day, I thought, okay, let me take a break. So then I walk outside, nice weather. I walk outside and I start chanting the Chintamani verses, Brahma Samhita Chintamani Prakarasat Masukalpa Vriksha, and the 27 verses that all end with Govinda Mari Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. So I was engaged in Krishna's pastimes, Brahma Samhita, like that. As far as how the depth, I mean, that's a whole other thing, but basically I'm engaged in the process. So I'm taking a walk, strolling, moving my body, taking a break from the computer, and then I stroll over just by my house to the football field. Cringe, yes. And then there's some kids, not even teenage age, and they're playing football. So from a previous life that's carried over into this life, I got attracted to watch the play. I got attracted. And then immediately I could feel I am no longer in spiritual pastime. I'm no longer in Brahma Samhita. Now I'm involved in some other pastimes that are all part of the absorbed in in forgetfulness of who I am as a servant of Krishna. So in this one moment, we get to choose what quality of pastimes we're engaged in, material or spiritual. And to be engaged in spiritual pastime, the recommendation is get so absorbed in spiritual pastime that, like, when the soul leaves the body, which could be today, maybe for some of us it'll be 60 years from now, maybe some 10 years, 30 years tomorrow, even the 60, 80-year scenario, it's not even a lightning flash compared to the eternal life of the soul. And when the soul leaves the body, we just continue doing what we trained ourselves to do, absorb in Krishna's pastimes, which is not different from his devotees' pastimes. And there's so many variety. The Bhagavatam has so many pastimes. So the key for that cultivation starts with Shuddha Chitte Shravanadi, Karye Udai, hearing and chanting, Srinvatam Svakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtanam, Vidyantastoya Bhadrani Vidunoti Sarit Satam, that Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul Paramatma in the heart of all living entities, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, personally cleanses the heart from material desire for the devotee who has developed the urge to hear and chant his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. And then the result of that, and Tadara das Tamobhava Kamalabadayasche Chetate Nuvidam Stita Sattve Prasidati. Then devotional service becomes irrevocably established in the heart, and we naturally experience ourselves as transcendental to greed and lust and petty anger, and like that. And then we become happy in the mode of goodness towards transcendence. That was just related to that verse. We just about a week ago, we completed a Safatova Advanced Seminar in Homestead, Florida. And yeah, most of those who were in the seminar, they had no prior contact with Krishna consciousness like that. And as as we're aware, there's like ground rules in the seminar, like for the whole week of the seminar, no meat, fish, eggs, or poultry, no smoking or drinking, no intoxication like that. And for many, that represented quite a different lifestyle. No sexual activity. But then just about 3 days ago, the seminar was about 2 weeks ago, and we had our online post training about 3 days ago, and like practically everyone was sharing. And I will say there was not just consciousness raising, but there was like powerful Krishna consciousness spontaneously emerging in the seminar, driven by the participants. A round of japa spontaneously emerged amongst people who didn't even know what japa beads were, like that, kirtan, so many things. And so, but they all shared at the post training, which was 3 days ago. Like they just were said, like, I don't know why, but like somehow I'm just following the ground rules, even though I don't have to now. Like I just don't even want to drink alcohol or eat meat or have coffee or smoke this or that anymore. So just we get that higher taste. Tadara das tumobhava kamalabadayasche chetartarnavidam stita sattve prasidati. That's the platform of happiness. We often say when we developed the Vedic personality inventory, our intention was following the Vedic hypothesis, the Vedic assertions, to develop an empirical basis for happiness and contentment and fulfillment and peace, right? So to the extent, the Vedas say this, research confirms it, to the extent that we develop sattvic qualities, even more Shuddha sattva qualities, that's even purer than habits, qualities, perspectives, that will correlate for those experiences we're all searching for: inner peace, fulfillment, vibrancy, enthusiasm, inspiration, like that. So starts with the process of hearing, chanting, and the more we absorb ourselves in that, like I was feeling good about myself. I took a break. I didn't just go to the refrigerator, didn't go to sleep. I chanted Brahma Samhita. Okay, So like hearing and chanting, absorbed in Krishna's pastime. And the more we do that, then we enter Krishna's pastimes with our full bhava, with our full heart. We go towards that. We go towards it. This is like, it's like a practice ground. Prabhupada's giving us an opportunity to use this body, this lifetime as a practice to enter into Krishna's pastimes. And then more and more we feel it. And that's important because it can be, we don't want our practice to be ritualistic, right? Like, oh yeah, I do this round. I came to that program. Yeah. Like we don't want it to be mechanical. Because if it's mechanical, then we're really giving space for weeds to grow. So we want to be conscious. We want to be conscious because this is like the most powerful force in the universe, chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very confrontive, actually. It's the most powerful force in the universe. So one effect of that force is that we'll notice weeds, the weeds coming up, and that's an opportunity for us to pull it, to pull the weeds. So So we want to be conscious and present and fluid in our approach to practicing the sadhana Prabhupada gave us. And simultaneously, it's not particularly helpful if we're not steady, meaning like, it's becoming mechanical. So I think I'll just stop chanting, for 10 years. Because, it's real spirituality is I do whatever I feel. Well, okay, but what is this I? Is this I my tongue, my belly, my genitals, my mind wants to be comfortable? So that, it could be like in the Christian conception, they have the Christian philosophy, the dark night of the soul. I think that's from the Spanish Saint John of the Cross, dark night of the soul. Meaning like in one sense, our love for God is shown even more when I'm not feeling it. And I'm continuing with determination to fulfill my commitment to chant God's names. That's one thing. If it's always ecstasy, then okay, nice. But it's pretty much, for those of us struggling to come out of material conditioning, sometimes are often not going to feel it. So how much dedication, how much that shows love when we're not feeling it. Are we going to continue with our service, even and especially when we're not feeling it? Otherwise, if we chant the names of God when we feel it, that's nice. It's nice. At the same time, we're limiting our steady progress day after day to be immersed in the joy of the soul in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In closing, Prabhupada's final sentence, one should therefore take great care and attention not to commit an offense at the feet of a devotee of the Lord. So that's like on this path, there's things to cultivate, like rising early, chanting the names of God, and healthy boundaries about association, enthusiasm, particularly the commitment to consume only prasadam. And there's things to avoid, like atyahara, collecting too much, having clutter all around our living space. That's one for me to look at. And association that will bring us down, will bring us to the material, not to the material festival of misery, rather than to spiritual pastimes. And then some Prabhupada's, this is something to avoid here, committing offense to a feet of a devotee. Like, let's say, okay, so it's one thing, like it's like, well, right now, I'm not understanding this purport from Prabhupada. I'd like to understand right now, I'm not able to wrap my mind around it and like that. Or right now, here's the standard, and I'm just not into it. I'm just like not that sincere. That's different than if we start like criticizing the pure devotee. If we start criticizing the pure devotee, then that becomes a hati mata. It's one thing like to humbly say like, I'm just not understanding. I'm not at that level. I'm not that sincere. But it's another thing if we start criticizing, then we're we're probably damaging we're damaging our progress, because Krishna is not happy if we become, out of our own envy or our own material ego, we start criticizing a pure devotee, or offense to a devotee is like, if maybe out of, again, our lower nature, we start slandering or gossiping or in some way trying to minimize a devotee. Is it someone who's sincerely doing devotional service and we're trying to stop their service? We're trying to get others to think bad about them. That will also hamper our process of cleansing the diamond of consciousness. So this verse again, Puryam kadachit kridat bir yadu boja kumarakai kopita munaya shepur bhagavan mata kovida. Once upon a time, great sages were made angry by the sporting activities of the princely descendants of the Yadu and Bhoja dynasties, and thus, as desired by the Lord, the sages cursed them. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and attention. I welcome any comments or questions. If anyone would like to ask or share anything at this time. Dr. George.
Hare Krishna, David, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm appreciating the Chintamani verse, and I wanted to ask you just a little bit, if you could speak a little bit more about that verse. I'm understanding it's revealed to us by Rupa Goswami in Nectar of Devotion. Does it have any relation to like Govinda Adi Porsham that we sing in the morning? Is it like, I'm appreciating how quickly I can like saying that verse out loud or reading it, how quickly I can have like an image or like a glimpse of like the transcendental world. Is there a recommendation as far as when to chant it or how it ties into the morning program or sadhana? I'd be interested to know anything like that. Sure,
thanks for asking. It's a nectarian question. So I think you're referring to a verse I referred to in the class. It's the 29th verse of the 5th chapter of Sri Brahma Samhita. Chintamani prakarasat masu kalpa vriksha laksha viteshu surabir abhipalayantam lakshmi sahasra satasam brahma sevyamanam Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who was tending the cows, yielding all desires, in abodes built of spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees and served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So I perhaps that is in Nectar of Devotion. I wouldn't be surprised if Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada quote it there in the Nectar of Devotion. And that verse is originally spoken or sung by Lord Brahma, who was the first acharya in our sampradaya after Krishna. And so it's part of the Brahma Samhita. Actually, I was recently reading in a purport in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a purport where Prabhupada is describing about the consciousness of Gajendra. And we have Gajendra Das Prabhu here participating. And so Gajendra was in the body of in an elephant in the heavenly planets, the whole pastime, whole story. And most or all of you might know the pastime, 8th canto, being attacked by a crocodile. Generally, the elephant would defeat the crocodile, but because they're fighting in the water, which is the crocodile's home turf, the crocodile was winning after a long, long time. So Gajendra's gone down. He said, oh, wow, I'm losing this. I'm going to die. So then from a previous life, he was Indradyumna, he was a great devotee king. From a previous life, he remembered verses and he started chanting those verses to his conception, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Krishna comes in a form of Hari to save his devotee. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, for this life and to prepare ourselves for future lives, devotees should learn these verses and let them go very deep. Of course, there's the Maha Mantra. The Prabhupada says, and other verses too. And he gives some examples. One of the verses that Prabhupada says is, Chintamani prakarasad masu kalpa vriksha. So Prabhupada really encourages us to go deep and make this verse part of us. It's a beautiful verse, special. And to some context, that actually when Prabhupada says to learn, memorize, but not just memorize, but to let it to get absorbed in the energy of the Chintamani, he's of course referring to that one verse we just recited, but my understanding he's referring to a series of 27 verses, okay? And Prabhupada, because in the Brahma Samhita, the whole text is about 62 verses. In the middle, verses 29 to 55, there are 27 verses, and they're 14 syllable meter. And the last line of each verse is Govinda Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. The first of those 27 is the Chintamani verse. That's why the whole series of verses, just like in the Old Testament of the Bible, like the book of Genesis is called Bereshit, which means it's Hebrew for in the beginning. So that the names of the books are named according to their first words. There's Bimidbar, it means in the desert, like that. So the whole 27 verses, Prabhupada sometimes referred to as the Chintamani verses. So even if we just learn that one, that's a wonderful thing. I get a lot of fulfillment by regularly reciting these 27 verses. We hear 2 of them each morning, right? Venum Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept at playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals and head bedecked with peacock feather, whose figure of beauty is tinged with the hue of dark blue rain clouds, and whose unique loveliness is charming millions of cupids. So each verse is a meditation. It's an oral meditation, it's a visual meditation. And so Prabhupada quotes the Chintamani verse so many places. There's letters where Prabhupada, even early in the movement, the 60s, Prabhupada's writing to disciples. He said, you learn these Chintamani verses, Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, and you chant them during your classes. And he said, people will be captivated, right? They're so transcendentally beautiful. So it's not like, so Prabhupada encouraged us, learn these verses, starting with the Chintamani verse. It's from Brahma Samhita. You mentioned Nectar of Devotion. I imagine it's there too. There is a verse from the Puranas that also has Chintamani in it. Namo Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nitya Mukto Binat Van Namanamino. And what that says is, it also has the word Chintamani, that the Chintamani means spiritual atoms. It means like everything is made of spirit, that the name of Krishna is spiritual. The name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. It's Nitya Mukto, it's eternal, it's liberated, it's pure, and it's complete. And so that's another verse with the name Chintamani that Prabhupada often quotes, as does Rupa Goswami.
Thank you, David. I appreciate so much all the context you just gave me regarding that verse. And there are 2 things that are coming up for me. And one is, like when I'm experiencing material disturbances, it's nice to, to consider not necessarily like trying to fix a disturbance or resisting it, but having, like, accepting it, and also having a way to connect with this wonderful words and wonderful descriptions that are so different from anything here, to like snap me out of like the whatever, is happening. And I'm also appreciating how, driving around Florida, at least we see a lot of stickers in the back of the cars, like Disney pass holder or whatever. And it's interesting. I was thinking how, people have these kind of brochures almost like advertised in their car because they know about Disney World and they're looking forward to Disney World. They want other people to know that they're looking forward to Disney World and have the consciousness. And I can see how like an argument for not wanting to like really endeavor to be focused on spiritual life is because like, we don't know so much about like that destination. But like we do know, like through Prabhupada, like we have this, so we can always, like, if we're feeling like is becoming so mechanical, or when I feel like I'm becoming so mechanical, I think I want to try and go to these verses and really get more inspiration and really kind of like connect with this brochure, about it. So I'm feeling very encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. George. I'm very inspired by your realizations, by your sharing. And so the one book by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that Prabhupada directly gave us is Brahma Samhita. So Bhaktisiddhanta translated Bhakti Brahma Samhita into English. So the translations, that's from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And so thanks for sharing that, George, because that's the thing we can see. We all want pastimes because, like, the routine, the drudgery of life. But I get to go to Disney World. Okay, right. So we all want pastimes. Like that. And so, and so what you shared, George, reminded there's a purport in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, purport from Srila Prabhupada. It's a purport to the verse that Nashashanka Napavaka Tadvasaya Te Suryo, that Yad Gadfan Mambi Vartate Tadama Paramamama. And Krishna says that there is a world, Arjuna, that doesn't require sun or moon or electricity, because everything's Chintamani, everything's self-luminescent. So Prabhupada, so Krishna is giving an indication of spiritual world. Then, of course, in Bhagavatam, it's expanded much more. And Prabhupada says it's like a travel brochure, just like your analogy. So it's like a travel brochure, just like come to Disney World. There's a bumper sticker, come to Disney World, visit Paris, visit London. Right? There's travel brochures. Oh, I've never seen Tokyo. Okay. So we have travel brochures to attract us. So Prabhupada says it's like a travel brochure. And Prabhupada writes in his purport, he says, one should be captivated by this information, which is given, the pastimes of spiritual world are they're there in Bhagavad Gita, a few drops, and then expanded in Srimad Bhagavatam Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so Prabhupada's saying, we should be captivated. Let's make it our life purpose, our life mission. I want to go there. Yeah, I want to save up money for the ticket. And the ticket is cultivating the greed, spiritual greed. I want to join these pastimes. This is better than Disney World. Yeah, right. To get that. And just like, so this is like windows to the spiritual world. Each verse, the Chintamani verse, they're windows to the spiritual world, and they attract the soul. So so Prabhupada's given us so many ways, such as the Chintamani verses, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, to always be absorbed, to always be transformational, transforming our mundane mind and wherever it wants to go to the spiritual pastimes. And I like that. It is like a travel brochure. Just so many material destinations are trying to attract us with their websites and like that. So this is Prabhupada and Krishna. Look, get
Back to yoga.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, George.
Come to the spiritual world.
Anything else?
Maybe, George, you can create a sticker, a bumper sticker.
Okay. Melanie is suggesting the service.
I was considering it. Just have that.
Yeah. Yeah. A Goloka travel brochure, which is basically these 30 volumes of Bhagavatam. It's a Goloka travel brochure and Chaitanya Charitamrita. And that's it. And that's something, because, there's, different God conscious religions, spiritual paths, but nowhere do we get a percent of the extensive descriptions of the spiritual pastimes, of the variety of spiritual relationships as we get in this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. It's we get God in heaven, and that's the idea. But like, if that's all we get, then Disney World can start to seem attractive. Whereas we get we get such extensive descriptions, Prabhupada said, of the pastimes and the flavor and the music of spiritual pastimes and the luminescent color and the personalities and the types of relationships, and where just like all the pastimes in this world, they just become dull and limited by comparison. So it's by far the most extensive travel brochure for the spiritual realm. Gajendra Prabhu.
This is just a little wonder out loud. I'm just noting how frequently curses come up, often as the basis initiating a story in Bhagavatam, from leading to Bhagavatam being spoken with the curse of Parikshit Maharaj to like Durvasa Muni and Ambrish. There's just seems to be a lot of cursing in Gaudiya Vaishnava. And I don't really see that there's any real pattern to, what unfolds, whether the person doing the cursing gets chased by a Sudarshan disc or any reaction to them is just left out of the story. It's just something I note with the bit of that song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Narada Muni himself, who does the cursing in the Mani Gruva Nalakuvara Damodar pastimes, Narada Muni himself, he was cursed. He was cursed also. Yeah, so it's a big part of the culture, and we can see that in these sorts of curses, in these sorts of curses by the different munis and sages, there's really the person's welfare at heart, for them to come back to their senses and come back to Krishna in the curses we see here. But so a lot of pastimes start with the cursing, Jai and Vijay, and the twin Yamala Arjuna trees, and whole Yadu dynasty. Thanks for sharing your wondering aloud. Malini.
I was just remembering, like last Saturday, we had a conversation about that.
Yes.
In a class in Singapore.
Yeah.
And one devotee from Singapore made a distinction between like curses and karma.
Mm.
And karma kind of automatic. It's not necessarily benevolent. Well, it's benevolent for the big picture because it's purging.
Yeah.
But there is not like the blessing of going to Govinda necessarily there. Yeah. And the devotee was making a distinction because the demigods, they are not supposed to prematurely die.
Okay.
They don't.
Yeah.
And I think the devotee was saying like, but then like the curse is kind of coming in the middle of their life to help them.
Mm.
So it's interesting because like the curse is always accompanied by blessings to come closer to Krishna.
Yeah.
And maybe as devotees, we're, we can look at our life more as curse than karma.
Look at it more as curse than karma.
Mm-hmm. In the sense of whatever happened to us that's maybe not according to the script of what we will be writing is a curse.
With a blessing as an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. Curse. Yeah. I think we mentioned in that Singapore class, like in the 5th canto, Bharat Maharaj, and it's described that he was on a very high stage of Krishna consciousness, bhava, but then he got attracted, and he had affectionate attraction to take care of a baby deer, and he kind of started slipping down the slippery slope. And this describes it was karma, but not really karma, and that wasn't involving in a curse, but that's where like it wasn't really karma because he was transcendental, but Krishna was using his karma to deepen his affection. So whether through curse or karma, Krishna and the pure devotee are just they're always finding ways to give us opportunities to cleanse our heart and progress in love of Krishna.
If that desire is there.
Yeah, reciprocating with it.
Otherwise, it's yantra, like it's just automatic machine.
Yeah, yantra Rudani Maya, yeah, like a yantra. So, right. So our job is to cultivate the desire. To like, yeah, I really want these spiritual pastimes. I really want devotional service. I really want to unleash my original love for Krishna. Like, it's one thing to casually want it, which is nice to come to that in this lifetime, but to like Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajita Pusham Dritavrata with determination, then Krishna and Prabhupada will find creative ways to support us.
And on that note, and back to what George mentioned earlier, whenever I'm in your kitchen and you start to sing that song, that I don't know the name of it.
Yeah.
It always puts me in just the best mood, and I get all like lighthearted and playful, and then I hum the tune like all day. And so I didn't realize what the tune was about, and so it's nice to hear from you. And I noticed you would smile when I would get all happy, and so it seemed to bring light to all of us. And yeah, I'm just feeling grateful.
Thank you, Bhakti and Kelly. Thanks for sharing. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear somehow trying to remember Chintamani mantras right there in the kitchen has some uplifting transcendental effect. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's encouraging me to be more connected, and in my thoughts, in the vibrations I emanate with transcendence. And just a little more context before we close. So these Chintamani prayers, the 27 verses all ending Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. It's Brahma at the dawn of creation, and he gets, because he basically gets revelation about the pastimes of Krishna in the spiritual world, and then from that revelation, then he spontaneously, with inspiration and out of love, he's revealing this song, the Chintamani mantras. He's revealing that song, and it's his direct experience. It's his direct experience of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just simply being a cowherd boy. And that's what that is. So that's why, like, whether we understand that or not, that's why it's just like this is transformational, as you shared, Kelly.
Yeah, playful. Now that makes sense, because he's just being a cowherd boy with his friends, and so we're just enjoying. It's sweet. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, right. Because right now we're in each morning we sing Damodarastakam, Damodar pastimes. Right after those pastimes in Bhagavatam, in Krishna book, there's the Agasura pastime. Then there's Krishna stealing the cows and cowherd boys, because Brahma, like, he's challenged us out. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the creator of all the cosmos, material, could just be so simply a cowherd boy with eating a sweet, and with his, like, well, how could that be? And then so Krishna gives him full realization. Brahma enters into those Goloka Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna playing, the spontaneous play of devotional love. And then Brahma just comes out with the Chintamani mantras. Srimad Bhagavatam ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Haribol.